Well, howdy everyone. Today, and by popular demand, I'm taking a look at Sigma's brand new and highly acclaimed 50mm f1.4 DG art lens. There's a bit of a battle going on at the moment among lens manufacturers to come up with the greatest 50mm lens the world has ever seen. Once upon a time, a 50mm lens with a wide maximum aperture was a cheap accessory that came free with your film camera. But now, these lenses have exploded in popularity for owners of digital SLR cameras. On a full-frame camera, 50mm is zoomed in enough for a strong emphasis on your subject, but still just about wide angle enough to get the bigger picture in, making it a handy lens for general use. On a more common APS-C camera though, as you see here, 50mm is rather more zoomed in, so it's a little more useful here for getting portrait pictures and other tighter images. Whatever lens you have, it's a handy focal length. Also, this lens's fast f1.4 maximum aperture means it can let in plenty of light for shooting at nighttime or indoors, and you can also get a fantastically out of focus background with such a fast maximum aperture. Unlike most 50mm lenses, this new Sigma device is certainly not cheap, costing around £700 to £800 or a little over $1,000 US. While a lot of fast 50mm lenses have somewhat weak image quality when shot with a wide aperture, as well as some other conventional optical problems, this expensive Sigma lens promises to give you fantastic image quality that really ups the game against its competition. Being so expensive, I wonder if this lens can really break some new ground. Let's take a look at build quality first. The Sigma lens is pretty impressive to behold, being a lot bigger and heavier than regular 50mm lenses, but it's also pretty good looking. Everyone seems to like the look of Sigma's new lens designs, and it's generally a very solid piece of kit in use. The large focus ring is fairly smooth with good resistance and damping, although I have used nicer. It has full-time manual focus, so you can turn that focus ring even when the lens is set to autofocus, and the large front element does not turn or extend as you change focus. The lens has a 77mm filter thread, which is a relatively common size. The autofocus motor is very quiet and works reasonably quickly. My copy of the lens had a front focusing problem, so I had to use adjustments on my camera to fix that. Thankfully, this is becoming a common feature of Canon cameras. When I got the lens focusing accurately, it nailed focus fairly consistently. If you want to do video work with this lens using autofocus, then your camera's microphone will pick up some quite distinct clicking sounds, while the autofocus motor micro-adjusts. This is a common problem for a lot of Sigma lenses. However, the lens is basically built very nicely indeed, and the autofocus system is quite nice and consistent, despite me having to make adjustments in the camera. Alright, let's look at the all-important image quality. A lot of 50mm lenses struggle with soft corners, low contrast, and chromatic aberrations when used at an aperture as wide as f1.4. Let's see how the Sigma can perform on a full-frame camera, in this case a 20MP Canon 6D. At f1.4 in the middle of the image, I'm pleased to say that the lens is razor sharp, with very good colours and contrast, and no purple fringing or any other optical issue. What a great start. Let's look in the corners then. And they also look very sharp, with no chromatic aberration of any kind. This is a seriously impressive performance for any lens at f1.4. I couldn't quite believe just how well this lens was performing. Stop down to f2 for more brightness and a touch more sharpness, and at f2.8 the picture quality is absolutely perfect from those corners and back down into the middle. So on a full frame camera, which is normally the most difficult playing field for any fast aperture lens, the Sigma is clearly giving an astounding performance. Now let's see how it can do on a camera with a smaller APS-C sensor, in this case a 20MP Canon 70D. At f1.4 in the middle of the frame, we see fantastic sharpness in the areas in focus, again with excellent colours and contrast. That's great. In this window, you can just about see a touch of purple fringing, which is a common problem for fast aperture lenses when used on APS-C cameras. But it's nowhere near as bad as normal for this kind of lens. It's barely noticeable. Let's check out the corners. They're a touch less sharp than the middle, but still looking very decent, again with no visible chromatic aberration. A very good performance. Stop the aperture down to f2, and we welcome in some excellent sharpness levels and contrast, and stop down again to f2.8 for excellent picture quality. So, when used on an APS-C camera, this lens's sharpness and contrast leave a very strong impression indeed. I've never seen such a sharp 50mm lens, and the performance and clean images at f1.4 are really exciting to see. Okay, let's look at distortion and vignetting. As usual for a full-frame camera lens, they're not really a problem on an APS-C camera with their cropped sensors, so I'll be testing on a full-frame camera. The lens shows virtually no distortion at all. Another fantastic performance for a 50mm lens. We do see some vignetting or darkness in the corners of your image, but it falls in a fairly gentle way, and again, it's less vignetting than competing lenses. Stop down to f2.8 and it's almost gone. So in the field of vignetting and distortion, the lens puts in another great performance, setting it apart from the current competition. The lens can focus down to 40 centimeters, which is a little closer than other 50mm lenses. At f1.4, the close-up image quality is good, getting sharper when you stop down to f2 and sharper again at f2.8. Another very good performance. The lens works averagely well against bright lights. You lose a little contrast and you also get a distinctive, soft, purple flaring pattern. It's not really especially good performance, but it's not bad either. This lens has typical problems with longitudinal chromatic aberration. As you can see here, the outer focus highlights have taken on a bit of a green colour in the background and purple in the foreground. Here's the same picture taken on a cheaper Canon 50mm f1.4 lens. As you can see, the Sigma lens performs just a tiny bit better, but doesn't manage to pull any surprises out of the bag this time. On a related note, let's see to an issue that's been of slight controversy, the lens's bokeh. A certain popular YouTube photography channel, which I happen to really like, has claimed that this lens has weak out-of-focus backgrounds, also known as bokeh. In this test photo, you can see that the lens actually has very smooth bokeh indeed, in most situations anyway. However, when the background is a little less out of focus or quite complex, then the bokeh quality can look a little bit smudgy. Still, most 50mm lenses do struggle with bokeh a little bit, so I would note that, once again, in my opinion, this is a somewhat better performance than the competition. Better than the competition, that sums this lens up well. As of August 2014, this is easily the best 50mm lens I've ever tested, and I highly commend it to you. There's something quite special about shooting away at f1.4 and knowing that your pictures will be coming out sharp and punchy and looking good. I personally don't mind the excessive size and weight of this lens, as it makes you look and feel just a little bit more professional. And with this piece of kit, your pictures will look the same. It's up to you whether the extra money you have to pay for this 50mm lens is really worth it against the cheaper competition. Keep an eye on my YouTube channel for an upcoming comparison video in a few months to help you decide. In the meantime, if you want the best 50mm lens available without spending £3,000 on the new Zeiss Otis, then this Sigma lens absolutely has your name all over it. It's very impressive and comes highly recommended.